Guys, welcome. And we are here with Anirudh Ramesh today, who has scored an All India rank 28 in the CA final, November CA final 2020 attempt. One of the most difficult attempts to deal with because of too many reasons, not only the papers, right? So there was a COVID scenario. There are too many things going around. So for every student, it was a very, very tough journey. And his attempt was technically due on November 2020 to my knowledge, yes. And there were people from May attempt also joining in. So there is fierce competition that we witnessed. Lot of students writing exam. And midst of that, with all this, he has scored an 28th rank All India. That's a big, big feat. First of all, congratulations, Anirudh.
Thank you, sir.
On the massive, massive achievement. And first of all, it was, on my part, I would say it was pretty much expected. It's not I'm saying that after he has done this, because I've told him a number of times he deserves a rank, because he missed a rank by a whisker in his IPCC, and he did a tremendous job in CPT, but at that point in time the rank system was not there. So it was overdue, I can say. It was overdue, and finally he got it when it mattered the most, I would like to say, because this is the biggest scenario, you can say, the biggest field when you can score. It's like scoring 100 in a final, nothing like it, because he's a big time cricket aficionado, so he can take this analogy better than anyone. So let's begin. So not wasting much time with me, I'll pass it on to Anirudh. First of all, the result day experience, that is what I would like to start with, because I received a couple of calls from him and it's just insane from my part as well as his part. So over to you, Anirudh.
So I think you were one of the first people I called after the results came, and so I've never seen your voice go so shrill. You know, in terms of your voice actually became high pitched, and you said I still remember the words. You know, like you told me that I'm a champion and all this matters. Like this really mattered the most. And so the first thing that happened was I was sitting on my bed with my parents, with my mom around me, and my mom and my sister. And my dad was asleep in the next room. So we were expecting results around 4:30 p.m. and as ICI usually does it, it always comes 2-3 hours before. And I saw my marks, I saw a good 500 something. And to be fair enough, I wasn't expecting a 500 plus score. So this, firstly, I was like, it hit me that it was not a 400 score. And that was a whole new experience. From expecting 400 plus to going to a 500 score. And then I ensured that I saw 2 passes in the mark sheet, because, and even when I spoke to you for that matter, I did not know my individual marks.
Yes, because I asked him and he was like, sir, I'm not aware.
So I hadn't checked how much I scored in SFM, which is Sir's subject, and I actually had to go back and check. And right before that, I felt if I'd gotten a 500 plus score, I should actually check the merit list as well. And that is when it struck me that I've been working so hard from IPCC. From missing it by a whisker, like Sir said, to probably, and I thought I should check the merit list, and luckily I got through and I got rank 28. So if you'd ask me how it felt on the results day, and honestly it didn't sink in for a good 4 or 5 hours. I didn't feel like I'd gotten the degree before my name, the CA tag as well, because I woke up on Tuesday morning. The results came on Monday, the 1st of Feb. On the second morning, I woke up and tried to understand if the results actually came or if it was a dream. Because the previous 2 days, I slept around 4:30 in the morning, and I'd never been this panicky before. So all of this was a whole new experience for me. And so this was what happened on the 1st of Feb, where things probably changed for the better. And I really hope that this is probably a new beginning for me.
It will be a big, big beginning and opening many doors for you in time to come. And the thing that I would like to say, first case, what I heard of you from now is that you're not expecting a 500 plus score. What made you think so in the first place? Because I know you're very good and you had a 444 score, if I remember.
Yes, sir.
Right, in his IPCC. So thanks to my good memory, I still remember he had a very good score. And that was, at that time, let me tell you, people who are not versed with the IPCC pattern, it was only 700 marks. Right? It was not 800 like Inter. So what made you feel that you will be in that 400 odd zone?
Because so I was always preparing, to be honest. I was expecting, I wouldn't say expecting, I was preparing to do really well, so that in case something happens, I would go past the 400 barrier. And FR happened, and then SFM happened, and after the SFM paper, I remember calling sir and explicitly telling him that there are no chances that I'm getting a rank.
Rank to nahi banega, I still recollect.
Because the paper was pretty difficult, and
Agreed.
I don't know if a lot of people know this. I haven't told this to a lot of people. At 4 p.m. in the SFM paper, I wanted to get up and leave. And I'm so glad I didn't, and I stayed put. But in hindsight, I came out of the paper, and I remember telling sir this as well. Everyone felt bad. Everyone thought it went bad. And not to be a sadist, but I felt really good. So
I still remember next day around after the SFM day discussion that we had over the phone. Next day, I called him rather, and I said, Anirudh, I talked to a lot of them, so everyone is pretty panicky. And he was smiling, he was giggling. I said, what happened? He said, if everyone is in trouble, then I'm fine.
So
does sound sadist, but let me tell you that at least it gave you a lot of confidence.
It did.
Okay, and on such a tough paper, he scored more than exemption to my knowledge. It's 67 or something.
67, yes sir.
Right, so he did well, and thereafter another shock I recollect that came up in second group to my knowledge, which was that.
In group 2 there was risk management. So risk
Elected
management
paper.
was something that sir had recommended for us to take instead of the FSCM paper. So RM was something I was decided in the very beginning, and it was something where I felt, even for that matter, SFM and RM were going to be something I was targeting 70 plus or 75 plus, and both these papers were shockers. And in my life, I've probably felt the two most panic attacks, I would say, in these two papers, because when RM happened, it is an open book exam for a reason, but it definitely wasn't that way. And I felt the 4 hours went really fast. So coming back from the paper, I went in with the mindset of getting 70, 75 plus, but I didn't know if I would get even 35 or 40. So to this day, I would say that luckily I just prepared hard enough for me to go past the exemption barrier in RM as well.
RM, it was 70?
69.
69, right. So it was just a wonderful effort, and I've never seen this guy panicky, because there are times I've taught him in CPT. People panic in CPT as well, let me tell you that. Last moment, everyone would. IPCC people do panic. This guy is someone who does not panic much, right? You can say the most panicky moment would be like, sir, I really need to work hard, I'll do that. Kind of a panic, right? You can't define it as panic anytime. First time I felt when he called me after the SFM paper, sir, rank bhul jao. After RM paper, he was like, sir, बस पास हो जाऊंगा उतनी मेहनत कर रहा हूँ. And I was wondering, he's such a strong lad in terms of his academics, and I couldn't believe my ears. But went through the papers. Yes, they didn't sound all that good, let me tell you that. Being a faculty of the subject, and you can check it in my YouTube videos of the suggested answer, I was not absolutely happy with the paper, but yes, a person who has really worked hard conceptually, who has put himself into the subject, he will surely cross the line, and he did it in style. And what after that? Now, one thing that I would like to come as to why he was feeling that 400 score was on his mind. That is what I wanted to reveal on. So, after getting that 536, it was an elation, absolute elation. Now, how did you prepare yourself for 536? Because I want the people writing May, November and the future attempts to mentally get themselves prepared in a manner you did. One thing, that being said, this guy has a little bit of a weird style of preparation. So everyone has its own style of preparation. He would be discussing his own. I don't think so everyone would be able to digest the pill. So, because everyone has a different, you can say, a construction. Agree?
Yes, sir.
So, because I'm generally a person who would say, one subject, catch hold of it, do 4 days, 5 days at a stretch, and this guy would like, okay, after 4 hours, I need to change my subject. I said, fair enough, because he is wired in that manner. So love that Anirudh shares his strategy on how he prepared himself for that good 500 plus score.
So the good thing that I had for me was a good study period. I got about 6 months from articleship, and I would have to thank my firm for that.
The firm you worked in?
So the firm I did my articleship in was Deloitte Bangalore. And I'm really glad that the policy in place was a good 6 months in place for all of us as articles to go on leave. Because so what happens usually is you get 3.5, 4 months and you're probably left with a few classes. So this helped me ensure that I could use this extra 2 months to finish up on whatever class I had left and then go into a proper 4.5, 5 month study phase, which really helped me build up the momentum. Sometimes what happens is you start too early or you peak too early and then you burn out. For me, I was able to pace myself in such a manner that I could build up gradually till September, till October, and eventually finish it off properly in November. And so if you ask me, what did I do differently? So I had this method called clustering, where and this is a disclaimer up front that this might not be for everyone, this might not work out, and I would recommend that you try it out once for a week or so and then follow it up. But the first one, so I would do about 2-3 subjects a day, where I would plan out, for example, 2 hours of audit in the morning of proper, because ultimately audit, I mean, to be fair to the institute as well, is ultimately mugging up. You really can't take your articleship experience and try attempting a paper.
And you did a lot of work. Let me tell you, he was talking about the articleship leave policy in one place, but let me tell you that when he worked, that was a big time slogging out, right? Hours together. I remember him turning up in the class, red eyes, and he said, I would have slept by 2:30 and 6:45 the class begins sharply. So the kind of sleep cycle that he had went through was tormenting. It was all a great experience. So you are saying that the audit experience that you have at hand from clients cannot be directly brought into the paper.
It definitely cannot, because ultimately the institute expects us to write it in a different manner because they want us to use the exact keywords. While you're at work, for example, you can, I wouldn't say beat around the bush, but you can learn in a more phased out manner. Whereas for the exam per se, it has to be exact and to the point. And for this, you really have to put in the long yards, because ultimately the hard work is what pays off. So coming back to the strategy I followed, it was called clustering. I mean, this is what I named it myself. So I would do about 2 hours of audit a day and move to about, so I had 3 subjects planned out for a week. For example, audit in the morning, SFM for about 4 or 5 hours during the day, and followed by any other theory subject. So a theory to begin with, a practical later on, and a theory to close out the day. And at the end of the day, I would revise whatever I'd done the whole day. Ultimately, just reading something does not make enough sense. You have to revise it multiple times over and over again. So this way, I was able to cover a lot of portions over a period of 4 or 5 months, multiple times. And that I felt was the key to cracking any paper, and for CA final especially.
2-3 things I would like to ask. One is, did you, for theory subjects per se, did you follow any short note mechanism or summary mechanism?
So I did this thing, I had mnemonics in place, where you shorten something into, you take the first letter of a particular answer, for example, and you try remembering these mnemonics. So these help stay in memory for a while longer than probably just learning something. And what I felt is the more number of times I saw an audit answer, the better I understood it. Because if you're going to read it once or twice, you probably don't get the depth of it. Once you read it 3-4 times, you reach and understand what exactly the answer holds. And you'll understand that practically as well.
And you memorize it better, obviously.
And you memorize it better.
The technique generally which I suggested was the newspaper reading technique, as I would like to call it. Just rush through. Do it once, do it twice, do it 10 times. You're a little better off than trying to read it properly one time. That is what I always feel, and that is how I studied myself. Because third time you read it, you find something, it was there, I couldn't figure it out, now I have figured it out.
Definitely, sir. So again, the strategy would be, which I followed again, is not recommended for everyone. Please do try it out. And so this went on for about a good 3-4 months. And I also focused on selecting key topics in every single subject. For example, in SFM, Forex, Derivatives and Portfolio, everyone knows that it contains a good chunk of the portions, about 30, 35, 40, 45 marks. So doing those chapters 3-4 times is more important than doing a bond valuation or an M&A, which is equally important, or something like a general problem chapter, say twice or thrice.
True.
Because the more exposure you get in these main chapters, it helps you get more marks in the paper. And one very, very important thing is, do not ignore SFM theory, because that comes for a good 15-20 marks and it's very scoring. So ultimately, my strategy revolved around identifying key concepts in every single subject and doing an ABC analysis and doing the A subjects, the A portions about 4-5 times, a 4-5 time revision, whereas the C portion maybe once or twice only.
Fair enough. That sounds quite like a very sorted out plan. Anything on practical subjects that you would like to focus, especially means if something needs to be paid attention to?
So ultimately with practical subjects, if you sit and start solving every single thing, it's going to take days together. So you do it once, you identify the difficult questions, the concepts that you probably lack in, and then you start identifying and practicing these all over again. And the only key is probably start auditing them towards the end of it. Do an audit methodology of the practical questions after shortlisting them, because the more number of times you do them, the more well versed you get with it. So that's what I followed, and RTPs, MTPs are very, very important because every paper for that matter, amendments, RTPs, MTPs come for about 15 to 25 marks every single attempt. And the material for that is very, very small.
Correct.
So if you cover that, then you're good enough. You're almost at 25 out of 40 and you just need 15 more marks to pass. Then my strategy focused on getting to an exemption. So now that I knew that 40 was sorted for almost all the papers, I was looking at 60 for that matter. And then how do I improve on that further?
Fair enough. Now, something I would always say that a lot of writing practice of previous papers, MTPs, RTPs, always recommend. A lot of people say old syllabus stuff is something not relevant. But if I recollect my module, there was lot of junk from the old syllabus, as I would generally name it. It's not junk, it's pure gold at the end of the day. Yes, and it becomes really tough to crack them. I'm talking about certain 2000, 1990s sums and all that. All relevant sums should be studied. That is what I would say from my part of the tale. Because the way paper panned out for him and the JAN attempt was an absolute shocker. So the institute is changing its ways of asking questions. So we also need to mend our ways and get more and more prepared conceptually. So writing practice. What do you contribute writing practice? One is writing practice that I would like to ask you. Second is the last 2-3 months of plan that we discussed at length. Would you like to reveal that to the students?
Definitely, sir. So coming to writing practice, I would say that for the theory subjects, I followed a slightly different method. So I would do something called typing practice. So I would take my laptop literally. And for me, I felt that audit and law for that matter was pure memory retention, how much I could hold back at the end of the day. And ultimately, if it's me writing or me typing, I'm using my memory skills at the end of the day. So I would, at 2 p.m., I would take my laptop and type a few questions I'd selected. For example, so today is day 1. I would stop studying something at the end of day 1. And at day 2, at 2 p.m., I would write those questions down. I would type those questions down. So this way because ultimately the point of writing for theory papers is to see if your speed is good enough. Perfect. So I felt that my speed was good enough for theory papers. So I did something like a typing practice. But for the practical papers, I would definitely recommend that you solve as many papers as possible, because FR and SFM for that matter get very clogged up in the 3 hours. So the first time I wrote an FR paper, I was not able to finish it in 3 hours. And that's when I realized that the amount of time it takes is really long. And you don't have to attempt every single question to get a 20 on 20. You can attempt to get 16 on 20, and then you might realize that there is no more value addition after that. So stop it and go on to the next question.
Rather than dragging on to the same question.
And that way you might end up, solving only 70 marks of the paper and not even attempt the 30. Whereas you can attempt 100 and, get 10 more marks in the remaining 30 marks. So to summarize it, writing practice is very, very important. So even if you're not solving a proper 3-hour paper, take papers and solve them. Like even if it's on a rough basis, make sure that you know the exact way to answer a question, because you will definitely get stuck in the paper. In the SFM paper, for example, there was one question where I knew that I'd seen this before, but I wasn't able to get it on paper. And that's when I realized the importance of writing it, even if it's on a very rough basis. Every single step has to be written down at least once or twice.
Because it tells you what's the flow. And paper practice, how would you take up papers at the end, last 2-3 months? 1 paper, 2 paper, how many papers you used to take up daily?
So I used to audit every single subject multiple times. So I basically solved around 1 to 2 proper 3-hour papers. and then I reduced the time. I reduced it to 2 hours, 1.5 hours, for example, because I felt like I needed to know more questions. I needed to go through more papers, definitely, but I wanted to understand every single type of question that had potentially come in the past. So I would sit and solve them. I wouldn't solve them on a 3-hour timeline, but I would solve them on a 1.5 or 1 hour timeline.
It's kind of just trying to increase the bandwidth. That is what, because when you know more number of questions, it becomes much more easier and less shocking in the exam.
I'll take an example. So Sir mentioned this, I think in October, if I'm not wrong. So if you're going for a paper and attempting 100 marks, you should be able to know, or should have practiced at least for 1,000 or 1,500 mark paper.
That is always the thumb rule that I say.
Which is when you start covering a lot of questions which get repeated in nature. So that was what I followed. But if you have the time to solve 3-hour proper papers, and if you can solve 3 to 4 papers, then please do go ahead.
Great. So 1,200 marks of paper is what is recommended. At least you should know what's happening in and around. And that's again a wonderful insight that has been given by Anirudh. And typing practice, let me tell you that this is a revelation I'm getting to know now. So because I know I for a reason know that if he would have told me, I would have had got back very, very aggressively to him. Why on earth are you typing? Still I'm asking you that.
That actually worked though.
Yeah, it worked. And as I told you, just a disclaimer before he started, I said this guy has a kind of a weird mechanism to do things, because I've seen him from CPT evolving over the last 4.5, 5 years, because he would always try to think a little bit out of the box and do something different. And I was, let me tell you that, always a little worried why he is not doing it in the conventional way. But I'm extremely happy. Yes, there are ways to do things out of the box, that unconventional way of playing things, right? A big fan of AP de Villiers, I suppose.
Definitely.
Right, so maybe some bit of reflection of his methodology in his studying style. So I personally wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't bother to type. The reason is, one, I'm bad at it, horrible at it. Second, how do I say a typing practice would help me write, because my handwriting again is not the best. But yes, he can write it decently.
Which is why the disclaimer was that it wouldn't probably work. The only reason I did it only for law and audit was pure memory retention.
Yes, it works. Obviously, when you have to type or write, for that matter, you have to recollect. If you don't recollect the stuff, so his idea was recollection more than anything.
So if I could fit in probably 8 questions of 5 marks each in a 30-minute time frame, then sit and write it for an hour and a half and get it perfectly in line. So that saved me an hour a day. I mean, not like the hour a day accumulated to something, but I'm just saying that, I mean, since it worked for me, it probably was a good idea.
Wonderful way of putting it across. If it has worked, then it was a good idea. Right. But yes, memory retention, it does help. How would you like to talk about the presentation part of the tale? A lot of people in exam are focused on trying to just finish the paper hush, and they do not do a proper presentation, which I always believe, write everything. In practical papers, I also suggest write everything. Ensure that it is detailed out in a manner such that a person reading it does not have to apply too much of his mind, because he's checking a bundle of papers. Correct. You can't expect him to figure out what you have done. It should be in a proper format. That is what I suggested. So presentation, part on that. So
presentation is very important when you start off the paper, to be honest. So your first 3-4 questions, 2-3 questions for that matter, have to be very, very important. And because those questions are the ones that will give the examiner an impression of who you are. So, because ultimately you will not have enough time to present every single answer in a very beautiful manner. So you start off your first 2-3 questions properly phased out, with enough notes, for example, in DT and IDT, with a proper format. But towards the end, if you do not have time, then you start rushing through it. But try ensuring that your handwriting is decent enough for it to be legible, and for the examiner to probably get a guess, because like Sir said, if he's correcting 100 papers in a day, he might just overlook you for whatever reason, and even though the answer is correct, you might get a 0 on 14 or a 0 on 20,
or maybe something less than what you deserve.
So ultimately, presentation is very important to start off with, which is what I felt. But towards questions 4, 5, 6 in the paper, you might lose pace. You might have to write really fast, and that is when it might go for a toss. But if you can maintain it for the entire 3 hours, then there is nothing like it, because you have created a good impression already, and you're continuing that. So you're just hitting it out of the park, like people would say.
Yeah. So writing notes in the answers is one thing that I would always suggest. Make it really clear, legible, and have a very stepwise approach rather than skipping things. I'll not multiply, I'll do it on Calci. That is something that I've seen a lot of people doing it. And his classroom presentation, his handwriting is, let me tell you a disclaimer again, very, very neat. That is what I felt always. I would look at his book and I would say, wish I had this kind of an handwriting. And so there are a couple of people who are blessed with such kind of handwriting. And that's why maybe the typing practice was like, okay, I know how to write.
No, sir. So if you ask me, I would actually write out practical papers, because you need to see if you can finish it in the 3 hours. But only for audit and law, I did this typing thing.
Yeah, but you had good pace, amazing handwriting, very, very neat. Yes, his handwriting is a little small, but very, very legible. You can figure it out from a distance. He used to sit in first bench. I would be looking at the board and looking at his book also. I would figure out what this guy is doing. Right? And a lot of times out of the box answers, that was his intuitive approach of learning. Before I would start doing it, he would always have a guess, and at times it felt right, and there's no better feeling.
I would say it felt right very rarely, because in class I was always stumped with the answers that came up. And I think the only way that I would say was pure hard work, because a lot of people are inherently smart, and no offense to anyone out there, but if you
are smart, let me tell you that. Because I've worked with him. Not trying to bloat at all, because in our classroom in which we were doing SFM, they were all in their anchors sitting. So it was a very illustrious classroom that this guy was placed into. And just because he missed a few marks in IPCC, he didn't got a rank. But with respect to his aptitude, I never had a doubt, because I know this guy would do something. He would show me the answer. Yes, I would say, no, Anirudh, it's not it. But one bad habit that I have is trying to fox my students on a very, very regular basis. And again, detail so much that the concept gets in. Maybe that was one of the reasons. That is why you couldn't get the answers many times right, because I was to be blamed for it, because I would purposefully fox them. You try this question, and I knew they wouldn't figure it out. But yes, sometimes they got it, and I was more than happy. And that is what I was looking for, the conceptual knowledge. And that is what he showed. He was trying, and that is what I like always. A lot of people put the pen down and they are sitting. Sir, आप कर लो, बाद में अपन करते हैं. तो उससे अच्छा है पर try करो. वो पीछे ही करता था. He would flip the book, rough, he would do it, put some calci to it, give an answer, wrong, right, whatever be it. Never stop answering and exploring. That is what I felt. So he was saying about smart people, you should be included in the list. Don't tell me you're not there. Now you can continue. Sorry.
So I think one takeaway from that would be, I started doubting every single answer I got, because your class was the first class I did, and then I did costing after that. So every single answer I got in costing class, for example, I would doubt it, recheck it twice, and then probably tell the sir there. So that was
a good habit actually.
That was something I learned on the go, and this is something I've learned over the last 4 years, because you've taught us from CPT, law and CPT, SM and IPCC, and then to SFM and final. So this is something I've learned from you. You always tested us really, really well.
I want students to think, and that is what they were doing at the end of the day. Because see, in the work life, when you're going ahead, you are tested for your knowledge. Your mark sheet will go a very long way, let me tell you that. But at the end of the day, when you're smart, you're a thinker, it makes you stand out at the workplace. That's very, very important. Even in his articleship days, he has earned a lot of accolades at his articleship place, just because he was a thinker. Your boss will not look at your mark sheet, am I right? So he'll be looking at what you're doing at the ground and how are you adding value to the organization. So that is one thing that I always believe. Think beyond the mark sheet. Yes, mark sheet is important, very important, but just going that one extra mile is never too bad, isn't it? So anything that you would like to add before I wind it up? And thank you once again big time for your achievement. Any last thoughts, Anirudh?
So the last minute thoughts that I would recommend, or I think that I can take away from here, revolve around the fact that so I always had a 1 week plan to begin with, which slowly went into a 2 week or a 1 month plan, and I always started working backwards. For example, if the whole of October, for example, was only for last minute revisions, and getting to there are a few very tricky concepts which even if you've done them like thrice or 4 times, you will still not get it. So those concepts were kept for October, and the MTPs and RTPs. So to summarize, I would say MTPs, RTPs and amendments for the May exam are very, very important, because the spillover from November to May is quite different. And for the November attempt, if your attempt doesn't coincide with the pandemic and doesn't get merged, if that is the scenario, then you can probably do only the November amendments properly. But make sure that you make a diligent study plan and you have it on an Excel sheet, because I really liked Excel and I felt like Excel was tracking me in some sort of a way. So I think just make sure you just work hard. I did not want to finish the exams with a regret. So everything that I said after every single exam, I didn't have a regret that I didn't work hard. So even if the results had gone, adversely,
Not your way.
I would have still taken it because I knew I worked enough, and I would just take it with a pinch of salt to say that the exams were probably hard and I should have done better. But so I would just recommend that you give it your best, and whatever happens, happens. It's probably easy for me to say, considering that I've crossed the line, but it actually works for every single thing out there. Just give it your best, and whatever happens, happens.
True, absolutely true. One thing that you would love to have is no regrets, right? Because every time we turn up and we say that ये भाई इतना थोड़ा extra पढ़ लिया होता, अगर ये कर लिया होता, then it's never a peaceful sleep that day. Trust me,
Definitely.
right? So whatever comes your way, whether you cross the line or not, one thing you should always keep in mind: give your 100%. So at least you know that you have done your part of the tale, and if things have not turned your way, you should again buckle up, run hard, and again try to cross the line. And there are hundreds of examples like that every year, every attempt. So here, on a final note, I would like to again congratulate Anirudh, and just as a passing thought, let me tell you that he's figuring out for his job, but he doesn't want to stop studying. Am I right?
Definitely not.
He's sort of some sort of addicted to that, and yes, you can say that he has a mental makeup, because a lot of people are like, okay, fine, CA is done, I've lost all the fuel in my tank, let me just drop the gun. But he has a different thought process. He says, let me pick up a job, and again maybe a year or two down the line again start running, right? So technically academics do never end, learning do never end, right? So a final congratulatory note, and I would wish you all the best in your life, and do just amazing. Thank you all. Bye.